launched officially on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members and no events on the calendar. At this stage, we have over 60,000 members among all our different groups in the Bay Area. We've completed over 1,920 events. We're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in Silicon Valley, bar none. Roger.
Hey!
Time is perfect. Appreciate that. Our mission is to promote entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurs, build community, and provide value in the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem. To that end, we provide content that is practical, actionable, relevant, stuff that you can actually use to succeed as entrepreneurs. We want to provide value in each and every one of our events, not just for the content, but we make sure that we provide a decent buffet meal at each and every one of our events. Is that a decent buffet meal?
Yeah. Oh, you want
Thanks a lot of you.
no pepperoni.
We have Royce Law Firm to thank for sponsoring that awesome buffet meal. So let's hear it for Royce Law Firm. This is Royce Law Firm, by the way. Harley. And at each and every one of our events, we want to make sure that we provide value for your time, which is your most valuable resource. And when you're getting younger, besides the moderator. So anyway, when you come to all our events, we will make sure that you get value for your time. We have many partners to help us do what we do: law firms, venture capital firms, angel investor groups, incubators, accelerators, colleges, universities. Tonight, we're grateful to Parasoma for hosting us at this beautiful venue. Is this a beautiful venue? Yeah. So let's hear it for Parasoma, and let's hear it for Pierre.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. So Parasoma actually was started in 2008. We're the oldest co-working space in town. What makes us a little special is that we're focusing on international entrepreneurs. So we've hosted around 500 startups since inception. A few ones that you may know, like Geekster or Omni or Poo. And we also host an international startup accelerator here called The Refiners. And we also run like many programs for either corporate partners or international entrepreneurs. So if you're looking for space and support for your startup, feel free to come to me. Thank you. Enjoy your night.
One of our other partners is here tonight. Let's hear it for Carlo and Rain and Lots.
All right. Really quick, my name is Carlo. Work with Rain in the Box. We have a product that can pull water from the air and you can physically drink. Cleanest water I've ever drank. If you've ever wondered as a kid, what does a cloud taste like? I know, come and ask me. I'll be over here.
So there are local missions to help entrepreneurs here in Silicon Valley and San Francisco. Our greater mission, though, is to democratize entrepreneurship and innovation all around the world. To that end, we have a robust YouTube channel, youtube.com/ideasipo. So please check it out. We have tons of videos. We've documented and archived many, many of our events. And there's rich, valuable content available on demand, anytime, anywhere, totally free of charge. Our partner in this endeavor tonight is Bread and Butter Productions. So let's hear it for Mike. Bread and Butter.
My name is Michael. My partner Alex is up there. Monitoring audio. We're a small production company based in the Bay Area, specialized in weddings, photography, music videos, product ads, and anything that has to do with the camera. So feel free to come up to us and ask us for the cars at the end of the video.
Well, here's the schedule for the rest of the evening. So we're going to go right into our panel discussion. Audience members, hold your questions. Panel discussion will be lively and entertaining. Controversial.
Shouldn't have said most.
Maybe humorous. Anyway, that's going to take us until 8 p.m. At that point, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. We'll go around with the microphone. We'd like you to use the microphone because we're recording your questions. And that'll be helpful so that we have a quality video that we can all use as a learning resource. We'll wrap up the formal program at about 8:30 p.m. Stick around, network, talk to the panel. Finish off food. As a courtesy to Parasoma, we'd like to leave the building at 9 p.m. And if you need food, anytime during the program, just get up and help yourselves. Restrooms are there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this off to our distinguished moderator, who's one of the top corporate attorneys in Silicon Valley. He's everywhere. He's at conferences, he's at meetups, he's at social events. He's Roger Royce. Let's hear it for Roger Royce.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks all of you for coming out here tonight to hear us talk about AgTech, agricultural technologies for the agricultural industry. So I'm Roger Royce, I'm the founder of the Royce Law Firm. We're about 30 lawyers based in Silicon Valley. We have an office here in San Francisco, offices in Southern California, and lawyers in other parts of the world, East Coast, China, soon to be Singapore. And one of the big verticals that we're involved in is AgTech. So about 7 years ago now, I noticed this kind of odd thing happening in my practice. Because we're full service, and we represent technology startups. That's most of what we do. I won't say all, but most of what we do. And I noticed I was seeing a lot of companies building these really cool gadgets for problems that did not exist in food production. And so I created a group called Silicon Valley AgTech, and the idea was to bring farmers up from Salinas, Fresno, Central Valley, up north, and get them together with the technology people and the entrepreneurs, and see if we could come up with things that were actually useful. And it was a big idea. It really took off. And one of the interesting things about it is that we got as much interest from the investment community as we did from the farming community. It was about that time that AgTech started to become a really big investment sector. And we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, since you'll notice our panel is pretty investor heavy here. So we can hear about what's going on in the investment world in AgTech, what's investable, what's fundable, what the next big thing might be. So before we get started, I guess I'd like to know our audience a little bit, about us. How many of you are, would you say, startup entrepreneurs? How many investors? Okay, I found them. Found the investors, entrepreneurs. Any farmers here? Okay, one farmer. We do these programs like this all over the country, and depending on where you are, we get more or less farmers.
Is he farming cannabis or regular ag?
Are you farming cannabis?
Founders, sorry.
Farmers, growers, producers. Okay, no farmers. All right, but we do get farmers that come out sometimes. Service providers like myself.
Does marketing count as a service provider?
Yes, it does.
Of course.
Jason Glover.
Okay, all right. Good to know who we're talking to. So with that, I do want to introduce our panel. As I said, we've got, it's investor heavy. However, on my immediate left is Ariel Zajban from Trace Genomics, one of the big success stories in this area in AgTech or agritech. So we're going to have the perspective of the company in this. Next to him, Jonathan Ilm from Band of Angels, a investor in AgTech. He belongs to the Band of Angels Special Interest Group, which regularly holds pitch events every month in our offices down in Silicon Valley and funds quite a few companies. Salil Pradhan, he's from Draper Nexus Ventures. He's a VC. He's been involved in this space. He's a frequent speaker at our annual conference down in Silicon Valley. And Jordan Wabe from Bay Angels on the end. I know I pronounced that wrong. Sorry.
Well, good.
Okay, good. So that's our panel, folks. And before we get started, the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to get into a couple of discussion topics. We'll go for an hour, and then at 8 o'clock I'll open it up to questions. I'd rather not take any questions before then, but at that point, save your questions up. You'll be able to talk to these guys, ask them anything. And isn't it great to finally go to a meetup that isn't talking about Bitcoin for a change? So why don't we start with, why don't we start with you? If you want to go ahead and, Ariel, maybe give a little bit of a description of who you are and what you do.
Can I use this one? I don't know if...
Yep.
Yeah? Yeah, can you hear me there? Okay, if not, I can talk like this. My name is Ariel Zaiban. I'm an agronomist. I'm from Argentina.
Closer to your mouth.
Okay, here? Okay. I work for Trace Genomics. I'm the head of product there. What we do at Trace is we sequence DNA from the soil. Is this okay? Okay. It's off. Okay. Now? Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So instead of doing a soil chemical analysis like any other lab, what we are looking at is all the organisms in the soil. This is the third AgTech startup that I work for. Before joining Trace, I was working at a company called Mavericks, where we were doing precision agriculture. That company got acquired by another company called Terranis, and before that, I was working for a company that is still called Blue River Technology that got acquired by John Deere about more than a year ago. So that's kind of a short bio. Yeah.
Or,
Jonathan,
No.
go ahead.
hello? Is it working?
Hello.
No?
No, it works.
Oh, it does? Okay. Jonathan Leong. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been investing and losing money in Silicon Valley since the 90s. But more the entrepreneur side, I brought Nintendo games in from Japan, distributed in the U.S. with a company called Hudson Soft. So if you guys are Bomberman or Adventure Island or Secret Castle, NES type of players, I got tons of it in the garage. I've also been involved with a company called ISIS. This is before is used in the negative term. But we had a vision inspection company. We still inspect the U.S. currency and high-speed digital signals, and we can test and find defects of pinholes at 60 miles an hour at 6 feet wide web continuous flow processing mills. That, and also I've been involved with products from China, forklifts to activated charcoal, to selling melatonin to Malaysia Airline, put into in-flight catalogs. So just various things. And today I'm involved with quite a few nonprofit organizations. He does DNA in the dirt, I do DNA in your blood, because what we do is we match DNA for bone marrow transplant. So all of you people who are not volunteered to be donors of your DNA in your transplants, please give me a call, because we need much more people to be on the registry. So that, and currently I'm involved with commercial insurance. I do insurance for BART, Port of Oakland. We do what's called RAP insurance. I have safety engineers. Also have restaurants and bars, the airport, Chinatown. Oldest Chinese restaurant in the country, Sam Wu. If you've never heard of it before, you gotta go try it. Only $1 sign on Yelp. That's why it's crowded. So mount a lot of different experiences, which again allows me to be the internal optimist in terms of looking at startup companies. And you say, instead of always looking at it, you look at it from the standpoint, you give me an idea, I say, well, how does it work? Can you make it work? Opposed to how it can't work, which tends to be a problem. But it gives me a breadth of experiences in different avenues and different industries.
Hope you guys can hear me. Yes, okay. So I'm Salil Pradhan. I'm an entrepreneur that likes to try different spaces. My most recent company I stepped down from the company is still running. It's a fintech company, so I tend to look at spaces that I have not done work in before. I use as an opportunity to understand the space and try and do something different. So I'm also a venture partner at Draper Nexus, a venture capital firm that operates in the US and in Japan. And my focus these days is to explore the healthcare space. Healthcare, as you know, has garnered quite a bit of investment over the past decade or 2 decades. But we think something very special is about to happen in healthcare right now. As you may have noticed, Jeff Bezos, Buffett, and Jamie Dimon just invested significant amounts of money in trying to change healthcare for their employees. And we think this is going to have a power shifting effect and cause quite a bit of momentum in healthcare. So the healthcare is a space I'm looking at very, very carefully. Ag becomes a very important intersection with healthcare. Good food is really necessary for good health. So think of me as an entrepreneur and a VC rolled in one. Depending on which side you are, I can pick and choose.
I know you can hear me. John, the name is ISOL. They changed it because of you, so you are in good shape now.
That's right. They spelled it different. It's okay.
So I'm Jordan Wabe. I'm with Bay Angels, managing partner. I'll speak less about me and more about Bay Angels, but I did join a couple of startups right after I finished Cisco. And when I saw how the sausage is made, I ran to the other side and said, that's not for me. Startup business is tough, difficult, impossible business, and people can appreciate it until they go through one or two on their own. We as investors think, yeah, just fix it and go do it. And it's never like that. So if you're a startup guy or lady, big kudos for you. I couldn't make it. We spent many years at Cisco, about 14 years. Prior to that, had manufacturing, engineering, software experiences. Lived in 12 states in this great country of ours. And this is still the best place to be. So, east of Sacramento, it changes. AgTech is very important to us at Bay Angels. We're very sector agnostic, but as the world is evolving, as many things are happening, price pressures, soil issues, population explosion, blah, 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 this is going to become one of the more impactful investments and sectors there is to be. Like he said, health is evolving. I think the AgTech is going to evolve and become a very significant sector. It's also very horizontal, so fintech, insurance tech.
You lost the mic.
Good. Testing. All right, you got 2 thumbs up. So across the board, there's going to be multiple sectors that are going to come into the AgTech and create more value for the investors and more value for the
I think it's running out of batteries.
and more value for the consumer as well. So I'm going to stop here because this is my cue to stop. Thank you.
Well, let's not stop with that. Let's kind of continue with that. You started to talk about, I think, a really interesting topic. What are the problems to solve in agriculture and food production where you think technology can make a difference? You started to describe some of them, and let's just stay with you for a minute.
So as you look at the agriculture, there's several things happening in the ag system that is not so evident. First, the price of commodities is dropping significantly. It's been dropping for the last 3 years. That basically puts pressure on the top line for the farm. They need better ways to create more revenue. 2, the soil issue is becoming very prevalent. There's less and less soil, and vertical agriculture is extremely important. 3, the evolution of technology is forcing the big 6 or the big 4, the big companies who manage a lot of the ag business, to really evolve. In the last 2 years, a quarter of the investment that has happened in 2017, 2016 comes from these big companies, those corporate VCs. So they're either investing to evolve or they're investing to quash, and we're not really sure what's happening in there. And last but not least, all the sensors, the robots, blah, 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 is giving those farms and farmers great opportunities to not only impact their top line, but they also have more productivity, more yields, more produce, and so on and so on. The last thing you have to think about is you guys, the millennials. They care and they worry about what they eat. So the consumers are driving the sense of sustainability, where is my food made, blah, 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 blah. And that brings in the blockchain and other technologies that's making And that brings in the blockchain and other technologies that are forcing us to see where was my coffee made and how did my coffee get to me, and so forth.
Any other comments?
No, I mean, the thing I would add is many of these ideas are not new, right? They're ideas people have experimented. It's about the economics of making sure those ideas work. Vertical farming is a perfect example, right? It makes sense in certain industries and certain geographies. It doesn't make sense everywhere else. And I think the price of technology or the price of land, somehow it has to meet to make these technologies viable. So I'll be curious to find out as we go on the panel, which technologies do you think are going to make these things viable in the near term? I think the technologies exist, they're not viable at the right price point today.
Well, the ag business is interesting because when you deal with the large farmers to the small farmers, I don't know, is there even a medium farmer out there? Because either you're part of the conglomerate that does the thousands and thousands of acres, or you're dealing with the family farms, 20 to 100 to 500, maybe to 1,000 acres. So the utilization of technology is very important. And of course, the one that can scale are the large conglomerates that are going to use, let's say, it's aerial in terms of drones to detect specific like bugs. Maybe they can find the bugs. Instead of spraying the whole field, they can spray a little, 1% of the area and get rid of the bugs. Looking at water use, with the drones, maybe they can spot the spots that are not getting enough water, and they can focus the irrigation on that for a little bit to straighten out the problem instead of watering down the whole field. So these are all realities of what AI and all the vision and the stuff that is utilized today that everybody here in San Francisco is working on, but applying it to the farm is always fun because the farmers are different. Farmers are really grassroots down to earth. I want to see it work. I don't care about the concept. I want to see it work. The money doesn't come out until they see it work.
Maybe as an agronomist, more from the field, I see the challenges being labor. In agriculture, we have still a lot of manual labor and tasks that in the future will be automated, but for now they are not. So that's one. The other one is, in general, pesticides. We have the big companies not developing new pesticides because of the cost of developing a new chemical is very expensive. So now we have what they are called biopesticides. They are less, the efficacy of these products is lower. So definitely that's a problem and something that needs to get solved. And the third one is, in my mind, we are still very focused in corn and soybean and wheat and rice, let's say, but we have these 4 major crops. So decommoditizing agriculture, big agriculture, is something that it's a trend, but it's something that I see gaining more momentum in the future.
I've been taking notes here, and so here's what I've heard that are big problems to be solved. One was labor, and that is a huge problem, especially in California. Transparency, right? Wanting to know where the food came from and that there's no slave labor involved, stuff like that, and it's organic, all of that. You mentioned precision ag, right? That's reducing the cost by applying the inputs exactly where they need to be and pushing every acre to its maximum potential. Minimize the inputs, maximize the outputs. Environmental, I heard you talk about chemicals being used and reducing chemicals, especially given the cost, and I think, Jordan, you mentioned sustainability. So those are a lot of problems. What kind of strikes me, though, is that, God, how soon they forget. Nobody mentioned water. Is that not a problem that we have anymore to worry about here in California? You said water? Did he say water? Okay, my bad. All right, so that's a lot of problems to be solved. What are the technologies that you're seeing that are actually really addressing those problems? And you mentioned blockchain, and sorry, I got to do it. Like everybody else, I'm kind of seduced by the possibility of blockchain. Or any other technologies that you might comment that you're seeing in the market that you think have finally come along and are actually doing, the job of solving these problems. Everybody? And then a mic.
Is that one working?
So, Fortune published the top 25 innovative AgTech companies in this year. And one of them is precision farming, underwater fishing, how to feed those fish farms more productive, more concise, more precise type of food. The one that actually was most interesting to me is a marketplace. They actually developed a marketplace so farmers can buy their supplies, they produce much cheaper, much faster, much easier, and they're doing really well. I think there is $100 million ongoing.
Farmers Collective, I think.
Farmers Business Network. Farmers Business Network?
Yes, that's the one.
Oh. And then the third one, which is the easiest to implement technologically, is a data and information management. They're allowing the farmers access to tons and tons and tons of information about which pesticides, which fertilizer, blah, blah, all the information that they don't have access to for $600 a month. And you get access to tremendous amount of information, and you get to optimize your business and your acreage. These 2 or 3 ones I spoke of, it's not big technology. It's existing, simple technology, and it allows those farmers, whether you are big or small, substantial opportunities to survive. Remember, I told you, the price of commodities is on an ongoing decline in the last 3 years in the United States. And this is only in the United States. If you look outside the United States, there is a big ag technology endeavors going out of Israel, New Zealand, Argentina, Brazil, and other countries. They're not doing it to make money necessarily, they're doing it because it's a survival thing for a lot of their farms. So it's not as sexy as we want it to be. It's a lot of existing content, like Salil said, existing technology that can be deployed in a different fashion.
I would completely agree with that. I think what I've seen is there will obviously be exceptional technologies, chemicals, genomics, biomix, but really most of the stuff you're going to see is application of stuff that's already out there at the right price point in the right markets, right? So give you simple examples. Satellite-based pictures for detecting, whether a farm is running dry or this disease have been around for a while, right? And plenty of people have looked at models where they fly a drone out to do that. Well, if you look at the actual economics of that, the drone models don't always make economic sense, especially when you want to spray them. Because you're not going to be able to hold enough liquid to spray, so then you need to still fly another chopper to actually spray them. So this is one space when the rubber hits the road, practicality will come in and take a bigger seat. I think in many cases I'm seeing technology being applied and then people realizing the price point doesn't work back. But in the second cycle, people look at it and say, hey, look, there's something else that was done somewhere else. Can I quickly reapply it here? Right? So as much as blockchain and these solutions are interesting, focus on the practical problems. If you have customers, focus on them. Second thing is not so much in the US side, but overseas. We see a lot of small farmers. In the US, they've started disappearing, right? It's mostly mid-sized and large. The small number of small farmers, I think. So I want to make sure that the small farms stay in business. And the large ones have been successful because they have scale. But we are, in other spaces, we've seen that scale is no longer an advantage. If you can get to your customers directly, right, and you have access to information just as the big guy, then the advantage of scale is gone, right? I think it's time to make sure that technology does not create these very large aggregates. And then we're forced to buy just from 2 or 3 suppliers, certainly not in my food. I want that to be a distributed supply where I can pick and choose what I have. So it's time to invest in those kind of things.
Just to add, unfortunately, it's trending towards where the big boys are going to take over. The sensors, the automation, the robots are allowing those big boys to produce more yield, more product faster, quicker, easier, while the average farmer, unfortunately, doesn't have the means and the mechanics to deploy this technology. So, like I mentioned, a quarter of the money that's been spent last year came from corporate VCs, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. So, I would love to be in the same place, but I do see a retail destination for the small farmers.
Yeah, makes sense. That scares me.
You talk about maximizing the utilization of land and everything and the crops. There's also the other side that is used right now where the information to market is really important. You can have a crop, your crop can be harvested, and suddenly there's an issue of where you're delivering it. You could lose your crop on a truck. And the small farmers know that. So the ability to have information and that information being used to direct where my crop goes, all the way to the point of delivery, truck, maximum utilization. If you've driven through the farms and during harvest season, they have all these semis and they're open, whether it's full of tomatoes or corn or whatever, and they're going to processing plants. Those are actually pretty good. It goes in a processing plant, and it's broken down, and then it goes into the freezers. But there's a lot, especially when you deal with fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, what you see at your produce markets, how long did it take for it to get there, and how long is it going to keep? Because as things become organic, more organic, less pesticides on it, you'll find that the shelf life of the fruits and vegetables are shorter. So the technology that's being used right now is where it can help the farmer get the product to the market so they don't lose the crops, lose the shipment, and that is being utilized right now, and it's not adequate. It could be much better.
supply chain. I mean, we're working with a company now, they've got really precise sensors that sit in the truck on the pallet, and they can sense how ripe the produce is. So when it gets to market, the farmer, the wholesaler, or the grocer, whoever knows which product to sell first, deals sort of with that problem. You're going to say something?
Yeah, in particular, I see agriculture being, in general, like what was considered as a poor data, poor industry. Like all the data was people going to the field and collecting it by hand. Even for me, it was that the case. Like if you do science in agriculture, if you go to the field, you measure the plants. Now we have all these sorts of data, sensors, satellites, which is a sensor, like all these different data points. But I think what is missing is the interpretation of that data, which is, I think, the problem now is processing that data. The other thing that I think we didn't talk about as much is all the, not because I work for a genomics company, but in general, agriculture will be one of the industries that will benefit the most from technologies like CRISPR and gene editing. So definitely I see something to be said about that.
Let's talk about a couple of examples like CRISPR. Let me give you one. We did a program like this in Austin about this time last year, and this big Texas farmer walked up to me afterwards and he says, there's this company from Silicon Valley, it's got this machine, goes down the field, and it uses this visual technology, can identify invasive species. So it spots weeds, and it sprays a little, just a little bit of pesticide, herbicide, and it kills that weed. So this company has saved me 95% of what I used to spend on chemicals on the farm. You know what I'm talking about, right? Blue River Technologies, who Ariel used to work for. So that's one example, came right out of Silicon Valley, Sunnyvale company. They were acquired by John Deere last year. So that's one good example. That's the one I like to talk about most. I think it's pretty cool. You guys have some examples of some cool tech you've seen?
This is another example of putting money into ideas. But there's a company in Sacramento. It was a company called Myonics. It had a product. This product was basically a pH1, pH2. It's an acid, hydrochloric sulfuric acid. But it did not act like an acid. You can stick your hand in it, it's not going to fry. But in terms of what it does in terms of killing bacteria, what we're trying to do with the product is to utilize it for grapes, wine grapes, and also for crops. It's very successful with tomatoes. You could, instead of, if everybody here who has bought a tomato at a grocery store and taken it home and eaten it, of course it's red. Of course, it's the reason why it's red because it's radiation that makes it red. Otherwise, it started out very green. So radiation on the tomatoes turn it red, but there is no taste. It tastes like water. Now, how many of you gone to French Laundry and had a vine-ripened tomato that they're charging you a ton of money for? There's flavor in vine-ripened tomato. But you can't take a vine-ripened tomato and run it through your shipping process and your logistics and hope to get it to your store and have vine-ripened tomato flavor. So what this product did was it killed bacteria. You coat it. And this product was totally FDA approved, everything. You can dip your tomato, vine-ripened tomato, into this acid, put it on the shelf. Week to week and a half later, still red, still taste. What it has is a residue on it that continues to kill bacteria. It's bacteria that causes the things to rot. So that's one way, again, in terms of product that could have done very well. And of course, as you go through a business, a startup, one of the reasons why it didn't work was the CEO. Didn't know what he was doing.
I know you're being recorded, Jonathan, just so you know.
Oh, of course. Okay, thank you. But it's okay. I'm pretty sure he knows what happened too. So as it continues that. So that's one technology that's still actually available.
Anything to add?
The technology I like is not sexy at all. It's a business, I forget the name of them, we looked at them not too long ago. They're actually allowing farmers to get paid the day after they ship instead of 30 to 45 days. Very simple idea.
Sorry.
They take a little bit,
LC.
some portion of the payment, but the farmer wants the money today, not tomorrow, not 30 days from now, not 45 days from now. And that liberated a lot more productivity in the farm because he has cash or she has cash now to start the next cycle and the next cycle. So nothing too sophisticated there, but the idea is
Well, it could be, a smart contract can do that in the supply chain. We're hearing a lot about that right now. I don't know that anyone's done it yet. In the UK, there's a company that has, but not around here.
Yeah, but
So,
that,
one thing I was going to say is, on the same theme of very simple, clean ideas without massive technology, there's this company that it's called Harvesting. I think you probably know those guys. I really like what they do. It's more for the international farmers than for domestic. If you are overseas or a small farmer overseas, one of the biggest challenges is getting credit, right? You want to buy seeds, you want to buy stuff. You don't have a credit history, and you're a small farmer. How do you do that? Well, they will have technology to let you create a credit score based on the history of your farm. How well has this farm done in the past, right? Because essentially you're investing in the farm and the farmer, but there's no data on the farm or data on the farmer. They take care of the first part, and they work with banks and insurance companies to essentially underwrite the risk. So AgTech doesn't just have to be about AgTech, as you rightly pointed out, right? It goes across finance, it goes across logistics, it goes across so many different segments. Insurance, exactly.
I don't know if this works or not. For me, the other company that we were talking about before, called Farmer Business Network, what they are doing basically is cutting the middleman in agriculture. If I am a farmer in the Midwest and I want to buy seeds, I can't go to Monsanto and buy seeds. You need to go to a retailer, and the retailer is not doing anything else than buying seeds from Monsanto and selling it to a farmer. So basically what they are doing is cutting the middleman. They are doing very well, so I think that there is something to be said about not only using technologies. When we think about technologies, we generally think about sensors, satellites. There is a lot to be said about developing new markets and new ways of selling products.
So Eric, hello.
I can give you this one back.
throw that one.
Since you had Mike, I want to ask you, as the entrepreneur, I want to get into the investment climate here, since we have a lot of entrepreneurs here tonight. You've been through 3 companies now that are venture funded in this space, which is quite a track record, because this is not that mature a sector. It's pretty early, in fact, as far as sectors go. So what can you tell me? Is it just super easy for an AgTech company to get money? Or what was that like going through the investment, the VC process, from the entrepreneur's perspective?
I wasn't the one directly asking for money in the 3 companies, but I have to say that one of the most important things is having a big picture and having a story that I think here in California usually we are like, okay, let's talk about strawberries, let's talk about lettuce. These are small markets. Like, I know that it seems big because we eat lettuce every day, but in agriculture, like, this is a small market. Lettuce is a 220,000 acres in California, and we grow most of lettuce in the US, while corn is 90 million acres, just to get a scale. So it doesn't matter how much money farmers spend per acre in high-value crops, still the total market size will be always bigger for corn and soy. So I think there is something to be said there that even for Blue River, even now for Trace, most of our customers right now are strawberry and lettuce farmers, but our story when we raise money is all about corn and soy, because even if we capture 100% of the market of strawberry, that's a very small market. So it's really hard to go after a small market and pitching that to an investor. I don't know, maybe you are...
What about that? Does it have to be a $1 billion market or $1 billion opportunity for you guys to get interested in investing in it?
So again, this is now a very generic question as well, right? Because it doesn't apply just to ag. So it really depends on who you're taking money from, right? So if you are a large fund, the economics of a large fund essentially mean that your companies, your individual companies, have to make large amounts of money for you. It's only a small number of companies in your fund that's actually going to be successful. So they need mega success. If you raise money from a smaller fund, that number may go down. Now, what that also means is if you think this is a $100 million opportunity or $200 million opportunity, but not a $1 billion opportunity, make sure you don't over raise funds from very large VCs, raise funds from smaller VCs, from angels, maximize your market size, but don't get to this point where you have raised more money than the market size. Typically won't happen because the investor will be very careful before they fund you, right? But going back to your bigger question of, is it easier or harder? I think the market has definitely gotten easier because thanks to people like you who've actually shown a light on this space, right? 7 years ago, people went and said, look, AgTech. I'm sure people will look and say, AgTech, okay. What does that actually mean? You're actually growing farming? People wouldn't understand that, right? Now, there's a growing understanding that this is a very important space. People understand right from wrong. And there's appetite for investing in ag. What that also means is investors are more savvy and they're aware of the problems. So if you go and rattle off a problem, you better know the problem really well. 5 years ago, you could have gotten funded with a simple thesis that probably was true but was not sure. You weren't sure you could get away with it. Now you're probably not going to be able to do that, right? So you need to go deeper as well. Find the right problems. Find problems that are big enough to solve. There are plenty of very large problems. Be ambitious.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. It's exactly what you said. I think that the seed and the angel stage for the AgTech is under pressure right now. So while there's $10 billion invested in 2017 versus $4 in 2016, the seed and angel investment dropped down by 20-some% year over year. The rise, the increase was in Series A, B, C, and D, typically driven by some big exits. So the seed and angel is trending down from 2016 to 2017, so heads up on that one. I'm not telling you there's no money. No, there's a ton of money in there. There's $800 or $900 million in the US only invested in 2017 in seed and angel. That's not small. And the deal sizes were, 80% of them were between 2 to 5 million. So go get them. Just be aware that there's more people looking for the latter stages of investments in the business. So that's one. The second one, which we talked about earlier, is 6-7 years ago, it was a very sophisticated solution. Now you have a ton of horizontal solutions that can be put into the AgTech. Visuals, big data, analytics, blah, 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 blah. So there's tons of opportunities to be had if you do it at the corn and the soy level, not at the tomato and the lettuce level.
Jonathan.
From an investor side, looking at a deal, let's say, startups are always is interesting because the concepts are there. How far is the concept to a beta? That's the risk that you're looking at. Now, your angel groups, a lot of them are not looking for truly, they all want a big hit. They want the 1,000, the 100x or 1,000x type of return. But a lot of your angel investors are totally satisfied with a 3x or a 5x return. So you're not. What are you talking about? Look at you. Give me your track record. So you look at the track record of these funds. So I mean, you're getting a 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10 deal that exit. Some are totally happy with that. Again, you're going to run into more of those than you're going to find the one that's going to go IPO, because the IPO are the ones that's going to require lots of traction, lots of revenue, and again, you need to. And why IPO? Is it easier to get bought out? By your conglomerates, in terms of dealing with it, a lot easier than trying to go IPO. But again, and what you also need to look at based on technology, is this technology that can scale where you can exit, or is it a technology that's a great business for somebody? So those are, there's a lot of good businesses out there that's generating. Doesn't mean it has to go all the way to being sold or do an IPO.
Well, we have a wide range of perspectives here, I guess.
Yeah, I'll just disagree with the word totally.
So I want to talk a little bit about opportunities in AgTech as you see it before we go. And let me kind of set the stage, keying off something you mentioned, Jordan. So I've got some Google alerts set up for 3 different things in particular. One is big data or farm data. Another one is the Precision Farming Act. By the way, you're hearing it here first. I don't think anyone else is talking about this because they're not nerdy enough to set up these Google alerts. The third one is rural broadband. And there is currently legislation now pending, working its way through Congress on all three of these fronts that are going to totally change the way government interacts with this entire sector, and hopefully level that playing field so that more of the small startup companies can actually get their products into the field. The Precision Farming Act would provide for a new federal agency that would actually put dollars into, in fact, create an official, a bureaucrat, and put dollars into encouraging precision farming type technologies, which you've heard some about, like the drones that can map a field. The rural broadband access, that's even bigger, because right now one of the problems that a lot of these companies have is they have to upload the information, as the robots, go through the field or whatever, and then bring it back. They don't have internet access out in the middle of a farm field. And when you got sensors, at the root level or on the plants, that's a real problem. And farm data, that's something we'll just have to wait and see, but there's always a push to provide new rules around how to regulate data. And you mentioned Farmers Business Network. They started out as a data company, just selling the data to the farmers. That's all they did. So I think you're going to see a lot more going on with regard to internet access, and I think that's going to create an opportunity. That's going to make these sensors a lot more of a value proposition for farmers when it's that much easier for them to get immediate real-time access to it. What other opportunities? Well, first of all, would you comment on that? Or anything else that you see as big opportunities for the future? Ariel?
This works, yeah. So I would say that when we talk about data, we think like the robots and the sensors, like right now, in every combine that we have in a corn or soybean field, we can pull data from the combine and create what is called an yield map, so to just spatially show the productivity of a field. Right now, most of that data is transferred in USBs to another computer. Like that's now, 2018. For me to get that data, sometimes we need to get shipped USB sticks. So that's big, not for the future, like for right now. Let me make that comment first. I want to comment that. I don't know if you have any other.
But of course, that's what we're talking about. We talk about rural broadband access, so you don't have to do that. It can be uploaded immediately into the cloud. Farmers can get immediate real-time data and analytics, and not only precision farming, there's this other thing we call predictive farming. If you get the information immediately, the computer can tell you what to do or what's going to happen, or how good your yield's going to be, or what your insurance loss is. So immediacy has got a real important role here.
Opposite question for you, Roger, right? You see this in the finance world, we talk about financial inclusion. Is there a inclusion that has to happen here? I mean, broadband access sounds like an inclusion problem, right? Nobody out here would complain about not having broadband access. And yet, on the farm, there is no broadband access. Is this an inclusion problem? Because there's a lot of work going right now on financial inclusion, because we see a large section of the community that is disenfranchised from having credit. Are there similar problems in ag that you're seeing?
Oh, I get to answer the question.
Oh, yes.
Yes, there you go.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. This legislation, and there's, whatever you think about Donald Trump, one of the things that is on top of his agenda is a big infrastructure project. Part of the infrastructure project, I promise you, is going to have a big allocation for rural broadband. And once we wire the farm, once we wire this entire country, that's totally going to make a big difference in the market for a lot of these products. That's what I think. Now, I could be wrong. You guys are the experts. You tell me. But I think that's pretty valuable to get, that inclusion issue that you just mentioned.
Well, it's damn right it's valuable, actually. It's more valuable than we think. Having access to this data right now is going to have a big impact on the financial markets.
Oh, yeah.
Commodity pricing, the speculators and so forth, they're going to be able to predict what the yields are going to look like, blah, 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 and price their commodities based on information incoming. This is better than gold. So on the financial side, that's probably what's driving that, is the financial predictability, is concisely that. Of course, there's the goodwill of the people. We do need to connect and understand and. The last component in the inclusion part is is going to be helpful for the small farmer because he or she can compete much better than the big farmer. And whether that's intentional or incidental, it's going to be good for them. Just like you guys didn't have internet access 20 years ago, but the elite did. Now everybody has it. Look what's happening in your world. Your world is completely different. You're more competitive, blah, blah. So it's going to raise the level of performance of the farmers if that does happen, and I hope it does.
Can we pause on that for a minute? I want to circle back to something I heard you guys say earlier about small farms. So, in California, your average farm is a small farm. It's a $6 to $10 million a year operation. So it's not the big mega, machine that we have out in the Midwest or in some other areas. But on the other hand, it's a big enough business to actually buy technology, which makes it a really good, market in California. But I think I heard you say that you think you should avoid California type crops, right? Because it's just not a big enough market. And honestly, I don't think I've heard that sentiment before. I've been trying to think. And I'd like to hear, does the rest of the panel, would you invest in a company that's focused on a lettuce trimmer, for example, or is that just, even though it's a great market in California, it's not big enough anyplace else?
Well, the California market is very unique. I mean, slow food, however you want to call it, farm to table, tend to drive a certain market. Okay, and that market are, again, the people that really care about where the food comes from, what's in the food, and who's distributing it, who's growing it. So in an area, if you have the wealth, or let's say the money to pay for that type of food, and because that's what you want, then that's great. But in terms of what the large conglomerates are doing, they're filling, they're filling cans, they're filling packages, they're filling what the 80% of the market is looking for. California is unique, and maybe the East Coast might be unique too. So farm to table will generate its own financial model.
So again, I want to talk a little generically, right? As an entrepreneur, you got to decide what market you want to go after, right? But there are two kinds of large markets: ones which exist today, and the other you cause because of your company, right? If you can think of models where you're starting small, you're targeting a small market, but your product, your technology is going to cause a change and cause the market to grow, cause the pie to grow, that's the best kind of company. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in ag, and you're certainly going to have farms all around the country become smaller farms. Probably not in the near term at least, right? But think about it this way: it's not always a large market you're targeting. You want to make sure the market can grow. Prove that.
You always say what I'm going to say, damn it.
Because I got your notes, man.
So it is about that. For us, it's more around great place because you're in Silicon Valley, 3-4 hours, you're in the middle of the heartland of California farmland. We want you to be close to where the implementation is. That's great. It's also about what you will do with it, above and beyond what you're able to do with the lettuce, with the tomatoes, or the strawberries. So to me, it's very important to have access to your customer, the farmer in this case, or allow the technology to grow at a slightly slower pace. And once you prove it out, you take it to Iowa and Idaho and Indiana and let someone else buy it from you, take the technology, give me my totally acceptable 3X, and then make it $1 billion
in 1 year.
I have a question about that, and I was going to ask you, that part about taking it out to the farmers and marketing to them, I mean, that's a lot harder than it sounds,
That is
isn't
tough.
it? I mean,
That
you've
is
been there,
tough.
right,
Yeah.
Ariel? Not to interrupt what you're about to say,
No,
but
yeah.
I think we can't have a panel and not mention that.
No. Do you want to say something?
No, I can pop it in anytime.
Let's let the guy who's actually done
No,
it.
I want to say one thing before. The main exits for AgTech are 3 companies: Climate Corporation, Granular, and Blue River. Those 3 were companies that ended up working for corn and soybean growers.
Well, solo.
Well, also ended up working with, and it wasn't that big, working with farmers, I think that usually people think that farmers are very conservative and it's very hard to sell them technology. In my experience, it's actually the opposite. they are conservative because they are investing a lot in their land, in their equipment. I think that if you go with a solution that is easy to understand, that doesn't change everything that they are doing, but it fits in their production system, you see a fast adoption. Like I saw that in Blue River. In Mavericks, we were taking images from plains or fields. We saw that adoption pretty fast. In agriculture in general, you can think from Farmer Business Network to GMO crops to precision planting, which is another case of a startup that is not from Silicon Valley but very successful. So I think that it speaks to the quality of the technology that we bring to farmers, not about the farmers, about how conservative and how fast the adoption happens.
If you look at food service, 1 out of every 11 person that goes out to eat every day, 1 out of 11, where do you think they go?
McDonald's.
Exactly, McDonald's.
Is that right?
McDonald's, 1 out of 11 people who eat out eat at McDonald's. What percent of the food service do you think is in your, let's say, your boulevards, your Michael Mickens restaurants, your high-end restaurants, your Lazy Bears? What percent of the food industry is in there? 1%. So 10% is fast casual. 10 to 11% is fast casual. 1% is high-end. So then you look at where the food is going, and then you look at where your market is. So if I'm doing farm to table, I gotta sell pretty hard, and I have to get my product into certain numbers of doors compared to if I want to go out there and sell my whole crop to Chipotle. I mean, there's a huge difference in terms of where you sell and how you make your money. So look at the food market, look at where people are eating and what where people are paying.
2 minutes left before questions. Anybody want to add any further comments on that? If not, I got one last thing I want to mention. Somebody mentioned vertical farming a minute ago, urban farming, and we are in the middle of a very big city, so I don't hear as much about that anymore as I used to. Is that a hot sector? Is that something that has been tried and failed, or is it something that you think there's some opportunity in? It's something other than cannabis, and we all know it works for cannabis, but for tomatoes.
I have some thoughts, but not from. Every time I see a picture of a vertical farm, they show parsley, or like a crop that is really easy to grow. We are not going to feed the world with parsley. I think that they started with crops that are easy to grow, and usually these companies are driven by engineers, which is great, but I think that they need much more. As an agronomist, I would say they need people who also understand much more about plants and how plants should be grown. The other part is that the cost of food raised in these facilities is much more expensive than food grown in, let's say, in Salinas. So until we can show some benefits to a customer, there is no way that people, in my opinion, are willing to buy these unless a very, very small percentage of people.
So Rajan, on the vertical farming, there's 2 elements. There's a small company that's doing really well in vertical farming, putting vertical farms in cities, and they're selling to Walmarts and the likes, lettuce, of course, and parsley. So that's not out of the question. It's not necessarily the mainstream. It's not what everybody's shooting for. But in the heart of vertical farming, there's the soil issue. And there's quite a bit of technology, and I've been, saying simple. There's sophisticated technology on enriching the soil, on creating some seeds that have better yields and improving the quality of the germs and the pathogens in the soil. That's a very thriving, strong business. I don't look at it because it's too sophisticated for me to understand. It's very complicated, and it scares the living hell out of me, seriously. I don't know what will happen in this, but it's an area that's thriving, and it's very big, and it probably has great potential as we go forward.
Right, soil health.
Soil health is certainly a very big area. So I think we're ready to open this up to questions, right, Rob?
First of all, let's hear it for the panel. that side. Make sure you use the mic, and feel free to stand up and introduce yourself. So who's got a question? Daniel, this side. Raise your hand. Here you go.
Looking forward, specifically within this industry, is there anything that you guys are looking at in particular when you guys are investing in within the AgTech space?
Can you repeat the question also?
No.
Yeah, is there any specific technology you
Kiss
guys
the
are
There we go.
looking for in particular when investing in, I guess, this industry?
Well, on my side, I'm going with the lower risk, which is analytics, data, technology that's been proven outside the ag, and how the implementation and execution of this is going to take place. And I like it whole because by going to the close-by farms, you can showcase or you can prove the technology works. That's on my side as an angel investment. But for others, it's probably a different conversation.
I don't invest, so.
There you go.
All right, next question.
This isn't directly related to agriculture or AI, but I think one topic, maybe another thing would be food substitutions. So for instance, growing meat in petri dishes, that is very, I know it exists, but it's also like very, I guess, new right now. So where do you see the future for those kinds of food substitutes?
Depending on how you feel on that issue, you either call that sustainable protein or fake meat. So whichever term they use, they know how they feel about it.
It's actually meat cells though, so it's really...
Soybeans
So
are in there.
I'm from Argentina, and we have a lot of farmers coming to Silicon Valley to see the Impossible Foods burger because they are concerned. Argentinians being beef. I always say, so there is a chef very well known called Dan Barber. He's kind of one of the people who started Farm to Table, and he has a book that I recommend called The Third Plate, where basically the whole book is about people asking him how does he think the plate of the future will look like. And he thinks that if now we think of a plate like a big piece of meat and a small piece of, I don't know, salad or a potato, he thinks that in the future the food will be more like a big piece of, let's say, carrot with a story, like the same way we have stories around wine marketing, like having veggies with a story with nutritional value and a small piece of animal protein. I don't see particular. I like that idea, and if you think about typical dishes of like, I'm from Jewish family, like Jewish dishes are like that, Chinese, all the like Spanish, Italian, all the typical food is a small piece of animal protein and a lot of carbohydrates or veggies, and I see in general that trend of going back to that. And I think that when it's more about reducing the amount of animal protein, not necessarily about switching to a different type of protein or fake meat or sustainable meat. Whatever.
Synthetic.
Yeah.
Malaysia has lots of restaurants that have created what you're asking for, what you're talking about. But of course, they've created these, if you want to call it fake meat or fake fish or whatever, but mainly a Chinese type of cuisine. So you can go to restaurants in Ipoh or KL, and you can get fish, you can have chicken, and it's all soybeans. It's all vegetables, and it tastes just like it. And they've been doing this for ages. So, Roger, you need to make a trip to Ipoh. Ipoh is in Malaysia.
Actually, Roger doesn't need to go all that way. He can go right out here in San Francisco, and he can eat exactly that. They've been making it for 10 years too.
Yeah.
So I think, look, current farming models, particularly on the animal farms, are probably not sustainable, right? So we know this has to happen at some point. Are these products good enough for us to eat right now, and do we get adjusted to it? I don't know. That's a consumer side question. We can't answer that, right? It's Do you feel, have you tried one of those meats? Have you?
I haven't, but there's a show on Bill Nye, on Bill Nye the Science Guy, where they did have someone try the synthetic meat, and it was created from like frozen cells, so it's actual meat, and it tastes like actual meat too, apparently.
I just want to go back to something John said. We are not totally happy with 3X.
I want to see your track record.
Well, he said happy. I mean, you didn't say.
Yeah,
Happiness doesn't require a track record.
There you go. And in that meat space, I think there are two types of meat. There is the soybean based, and then the lab grown, which are different because one is fundamentally an animal cell and the other one is not. So that's.
You're thinking of Memphis meats, I think.
I think so, yeah.
More hypothetical than I was been so far, but when it comes to, you mentioned things not being sustainable the way they are now. For us to shift, do you think it's going to be economics that puts the pressure, or is it going to be some sort of something more chaotic or disastrous, or is it going to be like a political pressure? Like what's going to cause the shift?
Go ahead.
Someone's got to say it. I mean, there's a statistic that you hear at every AgTech panel about how the world is growing. We're going to have to double our food production by 2050 to feed the 10 million people that are going to be on the planet. And there's just not enough land. There's no new land that we're making, so you got to push more production out of the existing resources, and the only way you do that is with technology. So that's the short answer. We've all kind of stopped talking about that now because. So 7 years ago when I started doing this, that was a real issue. It's like, my God, we're going to run out of food. We're all going to starve to death. But now nobody really thinks that because we can see that that's not going to happen. The tech will actually get us there. So now the issue is not, gee, in 2050 will people starve? The issue is, gee, how can we be more productive now? Right? How can we, deal with the more immediate concerns? And I have a cynical answer to your question. I think it's really just a matter of profit motive that's going to drive a lot of this.
That's cynical.
It's great if we can save the world, in the meantime. But for now, the tech is there. It just hasn't been. It hasn't. It just hasn't been taken up. So Will says he's doing a lot of stuff in healthcare. Well, here's a surprising thing for you. I'm seeing a lot of technologies that have been used in healthcare for a long time, now being used in agriculture. When I started this, there were no handheld monitors that could detect pathogens out in the field. There are now, but that's been in healthcare for a long time. And we're seeing that over and over again. In fact, one of our big sponsors for our big conference we do, I won't say who, but it's one of the largest software companies in the world. And one of their head of the SaaS departments, he said to me, he says, agriculture is our last frontier. It's that one nut we haven't been able to crack. So it's like the tech is out there, just trying to find its application in the market. So that's my answer. What do you guys think?
I think it depends on what branch of economics you subscribe to. Like, do you feel dour and feel like a Malthusian, where you look at the world and say, hey, we're eventually going to kill ourselves and we've got to find a way to survive? I think I would agree with Roger. I think our human ingenuity takes over. We find creative ways. Just take a simple example, right? When you go to Costco and buy your fish, as an example, do you buy farm-raised fish or wild fish?
Buy the fish on sale.
That's almost always farm-raised.
That's the answer.
Right? There's a huge price difference. I try and buy only wild, right? But the price differential, if the price differential became 10x, what would I do then?
Fish on sale. The cheap fish.
Correct. So I think that's what in the end ends up happening is you have a new generation goes in and says, yeah, this tastes pretty good, so long as we don't think there are any ill effects of that. It's a new food. I mean, at some point on this planet, certainly in the northern hemisphere, in India where I grew up, there was no potato, right? It was a new food. Maybe we'll think of this as new food. It just takes a generation to get used to it.
Okay, comment down here.
Yeah.
No. Yep.
Thank you. I think it's a big, multifactorial problem, and assigning one answer is hard. I think that you have, even from fish, from seafood, you have some consumer-driven initiatives. Like we have the Seafood Watch program in the Monterrey Bay Aquarium that says which fish is sustainable, and some even Whole Foods buys based on that. We have in agriculture, General Mills and if like companies, even Wrangler, like the cotton now has to come from sustainable sources, and that's also a marketing differentiator for them. So, and on the other hand, something that we always say in agriculture is that for a farmer to be maximizing the inputs, that's also a sustainable decision. Like to be efficient in terms of inputs and trying to get the most out of a lower amount of inputs, that's also trying to maximize that. And I think that technology can also help us to get there.
There's a company that I met at Rogers' firm I invested in. It's a company called Misfit, and it has to do with organic food. What % of the organic crops do you think is not sold and is plowed under?
Big. Depends. Spinach can be, yeah, a lot.
Yeah, 45 to 60% of the crop is plowed back under because it doesn't sell. Why doesn't it sell? Because if you go to your Safeway, fruits and vegetables have to look good. So these don't look good. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing at all wrong with it. It just don't look good. So, you know, if you go to your French Laundry and you walk across the street, they pick the carrots and whatever they use, the parsley. You know, you don't really see it unless they're giving you the whole product. So they can take these ugly food and break it up and make soup out of it, whether it's, squash or whatever, cucumbers. So this company took that idea and took the crops that are ugly and turned it into, cold pressed juices, to soups, to whatever. And so they're getting the product at a you got the organic, the high-end product, but you're getting it at a much large discount. And that's how their whole product is sold to the retail stores. But again, they've just changed their model a little bit. But still, the idea of utilizing more of the crops that won't go to retail.
Just a small story. I was in Salinas a couple of weeks ago in a celery field that wasn't getting harvested because it wasn't an 8-inch celery. Like that's what, totally made up criteria that we have to sell celery. And a lot of money went into that crop. A lot of crops, they don't get harvested because they don't have a market, because they don't look good, and also it's about changing this criteria and changing the perception about the food for us too. Yeah.
Next question, Senator.
I'm working on a project right now involving spices on the blockchain in India, and one of the things that I'd love to just get your thoughts on is that what we're running into is a sensors issue. That because of the nature of Indian agriculture, you have a problem where you're investing a lot of money operationally in audit, making sure that people are honest. And I've talked to Zest and Wright and other people, and I don't know if you guys in your travels have run into people doing good, cheap farm-level sensors, and what your thoughts on the evolution of sensor technology is.
So you have a last mile problem, basically.
First mile.
First mile.
Yeah, without going down the rabbit hole, it's how do you could do an audit test of the soil, but then how do you track pesticide drift across the field? How do you could do humidity testing on the field, but how do you test for unauthorized application of pesticides, herbicides, things like that, in a way that you don't have to be spending a lot of money on third-party audit. And so I'm just curious what people have run into in terms of sensors that track that sort of stuff.
So the question is, what sensors are available out there for that? I don't know.
I can tell you that I'm trying to sell what we do, but a lot of these applications show up in the soil microbiome. That's what we are looking at. So there are some bacteria, for example, that they like glyphosate to eat one of the Roundup, the active ingredient Roundup. So if you apply glyphosate, that the abundance of that particular bacteria will increase in the soil. But a lot of these, we have sensors that are very good for some variables. Some others are really difficult, like applications. And I would say that in that case, I would look for proxies. For example, if there was an application, I would look for soil compaction. Like there was actually a machine running through that field. Like looking for those proxies, I think it might be the way to go.
Bacteria.
One of the things you mentioned was soil quality is a real big issue. There's a lot of things that you've been talking about, mostly monocultures is the largest part of the market. A couple of things are happening globally, which people are becoming much more diverse in the kinds of food they like, because they get access to a global market. Monocultures have a tendency to produce a lot of chemicals that roll into the seed, and that is becoming a political issue. What are you looking at in terms of that sort of stuff? For instance, polycultures are a lot more yield per acre than a monoculture.
We don't know. I have mixed feelings about that.
I'm in the dirt, but not that.
I do think that crop rotations, like this means, for example, having 1 year wheat, 1 year soy, 1 year corn in a typical like Midwest rotation, that helps, in particular, to break some disease cycle. And in the case of the corn and typical corn and soybean rotation, you have the soybean that is adding nitrogen because it's a legume, while the corn is adding carbon because it's a higher biomass crop. I'm getting like agronomy nerd right now.
Yes.
But there are places like in Europe where we have been growing wheat for the last hundreds of years, and these are the most productive wheat farms in the world. So I think that the argument of polyculture, I don't think it's necessarily true. I think that usually we try to look at nature and say like, oh, nature is diverse, like we need diversity in the farm. Agriculture is not nature, like agriculture is different, and what we are doing is maximizing productivity. I know that now I'm wearing my agronomy hat, but there are like, cornfield is very productive, so I don't necessarily see that we need to move into polycultures. But I do think that technology will allow us to make better land use, so we'll be able to feed more crops in 1 year, that's for sure.
Next question.
Hi, you spoke about how AgTech has a lot of opportunities with kind of modern technology that's already available. But some of the bigger problems like kind of a lack of fresh water around the world and maybe some soil health, do you think those big problems need some new technology to invent it, or do you think it's more of the application of what's currently available to really solve those big problems?
If you just look at the state of California in terms of the last 7 years, only one had excess water, rest were semi-drought years and drought years. Agriculture paid the price. If you've driven down Highway 5, you know that the crops weren't being watered, and it just became a dust bowl, for 30, 40, 50 miles because they couldn't get the water. Groundwater is a huge issue. Groundwater, they pump in the Central Valley, they pump water out of the ground, and then it circulates through the system again. You pump the water out, you water the plants, and then it goes back down, and you think there's enough water to pump back up again. The problem is fertilizer. You fertilize the crops, the fertilizer gets stuck on top, and it starts sinking into the soil, and then you're running your water through that again, and then what kind of water are you getting out of it? And California, another issue is called cattle. Your groundwater is polluted by urine. The cattle is amazing what it can do to groundwater. So looking for new sources of water, it will always be a big deal. Maybe not in the Midwest because they're flooding, but in California and other areas where the land is rich and they still need the water to make the crops, constant way of either cleaning, desalinization is a possibility, all the way to dealing with other types of filtration. But water is going to be your big deal. It's just like nothing new. Like if you ran a golf course, what's the 2 things for a golf course? If you have these 2 things, you can have a golf course. It's not land.
Water.
It's water
and holes.
Fertilizer, water and fertilizer. How do you think those things stay green?
So one thing to add to your specific problem on water, right? Forget the US for a moment and think internationally, right? Take India as an example. My worry is the shortage of water is going to cause wars. It's that big a problem in the next 50 years, right? And so at this, the challenge always when building a company is you build a product and the output, let's say, is water. Is it at the right price for you to sell today and for your company to survive? And the answer to that might be no, let's just say, right? At what point does it become viable? Certainly some point in the future, wars are going to be fought over water. We're getting to that future. I don't know how far it is, depending on the geography. So this will become a very, very important question in the near future.
I think water for sure. One thing about water is that water doesn't disappear. So if there is less water in one place, there will be more water in another place. So too much water is also a problem in agriculture. We have more extreme rainfall events because of climate change, so that's a big problem. Pollination is another big problem that we don't have a solution for, like the bees and how we are dependent on them. And the third one, which is often overlooked, is heat stress. We have a window, in particular in big productive areas, Brazil, Argentina, Russia, and the US. They are feeding the world. If we happen to have a heat stress, this means like a high temperature above a given threshold for more than a couple days, the productivity loss will be very high, very, very high. And we don't have a solution for that.
You know, before we leave that, I just want to mention that one of our sponsors here tonight creates water from air. But, you know, I've go ahead.
Yeah, so that was a big concern that you brought up because literally water can cause wars. It's a big fact of life. You die in 3 days without it. But now we're taking advantage of the fact that every day when the sun hits the ocean, trillions of gallons of water gets shot up in the air. Now, where does that all go? Why aren't we tapping into it? Why aren't we tapping into the ground, which takes millions of years for water to seep down into it, and now you're just draining it off? This causes earthquakes, this causes major, major problems. So why can't we just tap at the source where it literally rains? So Rain the Box is trying to circumvent all that and just get it from the source, right where Mother Nature creates it all itself. And then we have the machine that can essentially turn that process of condensation into your home. 8 gallons of water a day for the home machine. We can actually scale this up now. We have the machines that can go about 256 gallons of water per day, and you can just put them in parallel and just run thousands and thousands of gallons of water per day, depending on the area. This is essentially quadrillion gallons of water, quadrillion gallons of water in the air, moisture every single time. And most cities are located by bodies of water, so you're always going to have moisture. If you want to go to a desert, there's actually water in the air. We have an algorithm that can track certain arid places. Actually, you can farm there purely because there's water in the air, but not in the ground because it's dry on the ground. All the moisture went up. So you can do quite a few things. I think as far as farming is concerned, it solves a lot of problems. And we talked about vertical farming earlier, right? There's actually solutions for that where it's also aquaponics. So because aquaponics, you don't need to worry about land. Land is completely out of the issue. Unless you want potatoes. Potatoes, you actually have to do a little bit more work. But you can farm quite a bit. Japan does it with aquaponics, vertical farming, plus they use peak lights. And then there's various farmers that like to do harmonic frequencies with their vegetables and whatnot. So actually not only make it grow faster, but grow better. There's experiments that were done where you said, I hate you to a plant versus I love you. It actually came out better that way. And same thing with crystals where it crystallizes differently, which is odd, but if it works, it works. There's testing that needs to be done for sure, but there's lots of solutions for these things. I think it's just the information just needs to go out and circulate a lot more.
What's the name of the product?
Rain in the Box.
Rain in the Box.
Rain in the Box, yes. We have a bunch of competitors, but we're the best. So.
That's right. So, yeah, what's your cost per gallon?
All right, we've got time for one last question. Yeah, make it good.
I think I assumed the discussion tonight would touch on urban and vertical farming more so than it actually did. So thanks for bringing it up. And I was surprised to hear the hesitation of investors. But it seems like recently vertical farming companies have brought in a lot of money from big names like Bezos, Alphabet. But what does that really mean?
I think those guys see 10 years down the road, while we, the seed angel investors, we don't see that far out. They also have the resources to invest and take a chance. So what that means to me as a person, as a citizen, is there's great potential for that, and it's going to contribute significantly to the water problem he was talking about, and so much more. If you look at what Facebook and Amazon and Alphabet are investing in today, the big money, it is 10 plus years out. So if you're looking for that, I think that's the right approach. For us, 2-3 years out is what we will be totally happy with.
3 times, 3x.
I think that when we have startups like Plenty, for example, getting $100 million, then everyone gets excited about vertical farming. If you go and ask lettuce growers in Salinas, like big lettuce growers, they are already doing that in the East Coast. Not vertical farming, they own greenhouses where they grow lettuce, so they don't have to ship them from here. So I would be worried about the overhype and trying to see something that it's already there, but now it's under the name of tech, so it's cool. Like it exists, and it's not new. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's it. Good. Good.
Well, let's give it up for the panel. Let's give it up for our great moderator, Roger Lewis. So, panel, stick around, talk about one-on-one. Hopefully, take some food home. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.